just to say thank you massively. We've hit the 1,000 subscriber milestone finally. It's more satisfying than I care to admit, which is slightly odd sensation. Thank you for watching, and do share, and we hope to make more of this. So we've got the ThinkPad P15 here. This is quite a large ThinkPad, so quite naturally there's an outer layer of the box. Let's take it up, say, well, the pleasing look of a fresh ThinkPad. Ooh, this is big, sealed, so we can unseal it. So on the inside, usual charger. You get the same 170 watts or the 230 if you have the RTX model. We'll actually need this in a moment. And the rest is the laptop itself. Oh wow, this is quite secure. Empty. Because it's quite a heavy machine, it's actually quite good to have more foam than what you probably see with the T series. It helps to absorb some impact. It's really good if you can get there safely, because otherwise it's if it gets damaged, it's not environmentally great. Usual documentation. Here there's some P15 and T15G. The latter is the GeForce version of this machine. So you see the seal here. I'm sure there's a better way to do this. Here we go. Take the machine out. Okay, so if you're immediately coming from a P53, the first observation is that this machine at the back especially is more rectangular. See? So on the new P15, you'll notice that the display is a little bit taller at the top. That's because it starts a little bit taller. The bezel seems to be a little bit thinner on the new machine, which is quite nice. The privacy shutter is a little bit tricky to use, but it's quite happy that it's there. On the old one, it wasn't easiest to use model either. You have to use your fingernail quite a bit. With the new one, it's more firm and takes a little bit more dragging. The display itself, we have the 500 nits option here. I think we're out of battery at the moment. On the new model, the 4K display is 100 nits brighter, but for everything else, it's roughly the same. On the new P15, you'll see that there's 2 speakers. On the old one, it's a little bit less pronounced. The specification mentions the new machine has 2 times 2 watts speakers, whereas the old one is not really mentioned. What we'll probably look at is what really matters. So basically the keyboard. So if you go immediately from the P53, the old machine, onto the new one, the finger says no. This new machine, the keyboard travel seems to be a lot less than before. It feels almost like an HP machine at the moment. I don't really know why. I've asked you to take a look at it yourself as well, right? And you preferred the P53.
Yep.
And this one, what did you feel? It was just really narrow?
It was, yeah.
Feedback wise, I think this one gives you a little bit less feedback. I mean, P53, and it's just tried and tested keyboard. If it were me personally, I would just pick up a refurb P53. Similar story for here. If you press the buttons, you still get some response, which is quite nice. Immediately going to the new machine, it's less response, and that's a little bit disappointing. What I would probably say is keyboard layout is otherwise quite similar. On the new machine, you have the slightly thinner, some of the keys is a little bit thinner, whereas on the old one, it's just more reassuring and more even typing experience across the board. What I'll probably say is also when I press across the keyboard, very little flex. On the new one, I'm just pressing onto the key and I can hear the keyboard frame effectively. It might be we've got an Opera keyboard, or it might be the screw underneath wasn't placed properly, but if I type here, you can almost hear it's a hollowness underneath and it's not quite flex. If I press down gently at the center, neither machine flex much. The P53 has a better keyboard than the new P15 by a long shot. How do I politely say this? To be honest, I think this is still better than the HP's budget intra-range ProBook line, I think. It's just, that's better. Now, if we just do just a quick check. So a little bit of hollowness inside. On the new machine, it feels a lot more hollowness. I think, if anything, the build on top actually feels a little bit better on the old machine for some odd reason. As for one-handed opening, I think it's a little bit more convincing on the new one. I can actually see the old P53 sliding back a little bit. I mean, if I can be honest, that laptop, the keyboard, it reminds me of the HP ProBook line. That's their budget business range. I mean, this one reminds me of the ThinkPad. And I think they don't say this in the marketing material, but unfortunately it's there. On the old one, you can see there's quite thick rubber support. I think that's a durable design. On the new one, it seems to probably likely to wear out more easily. Okay, maybe we're overreacting a little bit. Maybe if you just use this machine, you're not going to notice a difference. But if you constantly switch between ThinkPad, especially this to older ThinkPad or this to desktop, it will be quite a shock each time. With this keyboard, maybe it's the fact that you have to get used to it to be able to make the most of it. But to be honest, for many people, this will be distinctively a less good keyboard. On the new machine, you can see the design is more rectangular and more distinctively designed shape. It feels like a gentle refinement, not massively different, but because it's rectangular around the edge and the contour of the shape, it feels more a big machine. I think it's true though, it's 10% heavier. I think it's about 2.75 kilos, whereas the old one is about 2.4 to 2.5 kilos starting at. So the new one, most of the change that you have are inside that you can't actually see. So what we'll do is look at the ports. So one more port at the back. Overall, the number of the ports are the same. Now the USB Type A port on the new machine is 3.2 spec, so it's 10 gigabit on those USB Type A ports. But for all intents and purposes, the other ports are pretty much the same. With the new generation, there's going to be 2 times the M2 slot. So you don't have the third slot built inside. Remove this cover and you'll see 2 slots here, M2 slots, and 2 memory here. The other 2 memory slots, I think, is just under the keyboard. So if you compare it to the old model, RTX model, is actually a downgrade. The old one you can do RAID 5, which is because the old one, the RTX model at least, you have the option for 3 M2 slots. Obviously, this is not the RTX model of the P53, so it has a different SSD configuration. The cooling system on the P15, I think that's the biggest improvement on the new model, has been completely revamped. How you disassemble the system is now quite different. So there's a 13% more air, and the CPU cooling heatsink is actually 30% bigger. So it's going to be quite helpful if you want to run this laptop with the RTX 4000 or 5000. At the same time, you probably can ask whether Lenovo is pushing the envelope quite as much as HP and Dell. In their 2020 refresh, it seems vapor chamber is a new standard feature amongst workstation laptops. On this one though, it's just a big traditional copper heatsink, which is still fine. What I would probably say is this cover comes off reasonably easily. This whole thing, base cover, needs to come off to see the heatsink, etc. This is not the easiest way to release it. I mean, it's not to say the P53's design is easy to open. The customer replaceable parts are easy to access, and keyboard is quite easy to pop up as well. But I really am not sure if I'm a fan of these, where you have to pry all these bits out just to release the cover. The old one, you can release those, and but the problem is with that, the heatsink doesn't actually come off. So disassembly of the old one is probably a little bit less logical. Battery, since the P53 has not been swappable, so that's something else. So just to summarize, on the new P15, most of the change, the big ones, are actually underneath the machine. So that's graphic card. So that's actually, you can swap out the graphics just in case you're out of warranty one day and need to replace a graphic card. But the rest of the board is fine. You just replace a graphic module. Whereas with the older P53, if the graphic card fails, your system board needs a replacement entirely. I think this is quite a nice change. The thing that you'll probably not really necessarily notice is that with the 10th gen processor, you can't undervolt the processor anymore, so it might run quite hot. Yes, the new cooling is more powerful, and the more air, bigger CPU heatsink. I think that's quite a nice change. But I think you also lose a little bit of control versus before. Screen, I think, to be honest, I think Full HD IPS 500 nits may still be the best option for the simple reason that it's just really versatile. With the 4K display panels, it's going to be stunning, but it takes a toll on the battery life, and some of the software still might not scale as well. So I think personally, if it were me, I would just pick the 500 nits IPS. There's also the lower end 300 nits Full HD IPS. I think that's a really good intro range. I'm glad they got rid of the 250. So the battery is now 94 watt-hour, used to be 90, so marginally bigger. If you really need a laptop this year and it has to be a ThinkPad, then obviously the P15 is the latest and the greatest. You do pay a premium over, let's say, a refurb P53 or even P52 machine. What I will probably say is you do get the generational improvement, and there's lots of very small adjustments. For me personally, the biggest change is that keyboard. It's not better than before. The keyboard felt spongy and almost felt like a HP ProBook line, the budget stuff, and also some flex in here. It might just be a unit specific glitch. It might be that another vendor does better keyboard. Lenovo probably multi-sources the keyboard. The newest and greatest isn't always better, and the keyboard as well as the click button is one of the really few things that, everything else being equal, that you really feel every day. On the old keyboard, you have something that's really tried and tested. Obviously, I understand that they're going for a newer keyboard design that's thinner and lighter, etc. It's just sometimes don't change what's not broken. We hope that this is useful hands-on. We actually lost quite a bit of a clip. So this is this P53 comparisons is actually a different idea. So we just decided to merge it together. I mean, all in all, if you had to get one, what's the best spec? I think the intro range i7 usually is probably fine. 6 cores, plenty powerful. If you needed something more powerful, obviously the Xeon is there, up to 8 cores on that. Also the i9, I would question if that's a good value for money unless you really needed to save the time. The other hardware, it's just the same. So 1 to 8, same graphic option up to RTX 5000, and one fewer M2 port, as we already mentioned. I mean, overall, it's a nice machine. Hopefully the refresh for this year's model is going to probably come out soon, and hopefully the keyboard doesn't. Anyway, we hope this helps. We hope we weren't too blunt. It's just, I think this is a really good machine. I'm really tried and tested, and that is different. Cool. Anyway, thank you for watching.